Miss Pat, I am so deeply honored to be speaking with you today. I first heard your name in 1983 when I was running the shipping department at Dr. Dredd's Ross Records in Washington, D.C. And I have for years wondered, who is this Miss Pat, this titan of the reggae music business? So I'm overjoyed to be speaking with you today, and I loved your book. Your book is absolutely beautiful. So welcome.
Thank you very much. And may I say, Johnny? Yes, those were the days. It was very hard at first, but thank God I made some beautiful friends that were doing reggae music before. I only brought in, the pop of reggae from Jamaica, but I know Dr. Dredd, Heartbeat, Rounder, they were there before I came. So I was happy that at least I had some company together with a few record stores in Brooklyn and Bronx. So whenever I send out the music or whenever I receive the music from my dear friend, Dr. Dredd, when I came in 1977, nobody knew much about reggae music. They knew Bob Marley, but that's all. And then the American company like Ras and Rounder and Heartbeat, they were importing a lot of records from England. Their type of reggae was the more upper class, I should say. But I brought dancehall. I brought in dancehall. And that's what I knew from Jamaica. And also the small producers' music.
Who is one of your favorite dancehall artists?
Oh my God. I think Lady Saw was the first one that really broke the record for us. She was so beautiful. On stage and off stage, she was two different personalities. And so much as the other artists, when you see them, Berries, Sizzler, all of them, they're so different from their stage appearance.
I wanted to ask you about your upbringing. You were born to Chinese and East Indian parents, and you grew up in a home in Kingston, Jamaica that was so small that your father couldn't bring as I understand it, he couldn't bring his bicycle inside the apartment until after everyone had gotten into bed. Also in your book, you write about your early entrepreneurial spirit manifesting in selling marbles and rubber bands. And I wanted to ask you about that. What are your memories of selling marbles and rubber bands? Where did you sell them?
I sold them in school. I went to a school called Greenwich Farm Government School at that time. I was maybe about 11, 12. We were very, very poor. And I thought that selling rubber bands and marbles were like a cell phone now. They were so unique and special, and elastic rubber bands. And the marbles came in different colors. There were big ones, small ones. So I thought that if I take them to school, which the kids loved those at that time, it was a way of entertainment for them. And it was cheap. My father worked in haberdashery and he could get them in big boxes. So I sold them in lunchtime and make pocket money for my lunch money. And that's how I think, looking back from that early age, I remember that if I had something good to sell and people enjoy, that's where I should go. Although in the end, I wanted to be a nurse after. But after I met my husband, I only spent about a year and a half at the university. And then I met my husband, and then I went in business.
And so soon after you and your husband went into business and you started Studio 17 in addition to the store, and this was right by Idler's Rest. This is a truly fascinating aspect of your book. I think a lot of people know about Idler's Rest. I didn't know very much about it. And your husband, Vincent, called the Studio 17, an enjoyment agency. Can you tell me a little bit more about Idler's Rest and the role that it played in that community of musicians?
Well, the Randy's record store was in the heart of Kingston. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's right opposite the park, where you have all the buses, the country people coming in. In those days, the musicians stayed on the sidewalk And there was a lane called Chancel Lane. That's where they all hang out. There were musicians, there were singers, there was backup singers, there was people buying music. There were foreigners from abroad. I remember Lee Goptel coming there because he was from England. He was he came to buy records and he came to sign artists.
Was this in the 1960s?
Yes, early 60s. So there's after the studio was built, there was a lot of gathering there because people who were recording upstairs, sometimes they want a backup singer. They would call the singer to come up. So you'll have Delroy Wilson. You'd have so many artists on the sidewalk. Keith Poppin, Jimmy London. And it was a little area that you could find. Anybody wants to know somebody or anybody wants to find somebody, just come right there. It was like an event for just musicians and singers and buyers. It was like an agency for music. And it was exciting time. It was music playing, people eating, people selling, people buying, people stealing. And it was a fun place to be with, you know. And that came on. From 9 o'clock we opened. The Idlers, I guess why they called it Idlers Rest. I don't remember the time when that name was formed, but it was truly Idler's Rest. Everybody comes there to listen to music, to buy music, to know it's hot and who is singing and it was really, really community-based.
You mentioned in the book that both young Bob Marley and young Peter Tosh came to the studio. What were your first impressions of those two? Just
like any other singer. They weren't outstanding. They just was normal people coming up to use the studio and to pass by to either look for their friends or buy a soda or buy a patty. You see, when reggae music just started, it's just like an experimenting. We didn't know it would go this far. You know, Jamaicans on the whole, they sing a lot. They sing because they're happy. They sing because they're sad. It's a way of life for us that singing is one of the most, and I think singing brings joy to people. So most of the time they get all their frustration by singing. They tell their story in songs. And that's what we're good at. If we're happy, we sing. If we're sad, we sing. If we just, everybody sings. Everybody sings. We didn't know that Bob Marley and Peter and Lee Perry and all of them were going to be famous because we all were just trying. We just was trying to make life. So reggae was just an experimenting, and it turned out so beautiful. Because the radio didn't play reggae at that time. It wasn't good music. I guess it would be comparing to hip hop. When it started, nobody recognized it, nobody liked it because it was street music.
Do you have any interesting memories of Lee Perry that our viewers might not have ever heard before?
Lee Perry was a character in himself. When he came to the store to record, people are a little turned off because of the way he dresses. And he's carrying the stick and the pans and all the things around him. And he would rent the studio for weeks. We don't know what he did up there, but he's just experimenting on music. I didn't go up in the studio much because I was so occupied with downstairs in the shop because I was selling on the counter like for 20 years. So I had somebody to do the bookings. So I really didn't go upstairs much. They would come down and play the record for me and would say, yes, it sounds good. Maybe we should do it this way. Maybe we should do it that way. But I really didn't go much in the studio. Maybe on a Sunday, if I go down to help clean up the studio, then I would go. But Lee Perry was very special because of how he dressed. And he's always experimenting a new sound. And 2 years ago, I met him in New York City and invited me. He was on a tour. He never changed. If you see my book, you will see that he never changed. Same red hair, pink hair. And he was just a darling because he took a chance to be different. He was far advanced. He was far advanced what he wanted and how he wanted to live his life. So I just give him a lot of credit. I admire him. He has been my friend. He talked a lot about Vincent when people was shun him. Vincent took him in and said, it's okay, you go do what you want to do. My husband had a characteristic. He didn't shun anyone, regardless of how poor they were. Most of the musicians at that time, they didn't even wear shoes. I remember Dizzy Johnny, Rico Ricketts. They just came just as they are. He didn't shun them. They wanted to play music. They wanted to experiment on their songs. He just let them go. So they all loved downtown because all the other studios were out of town. And they weren't for rental. They were just for they had studio for their own self. Like Studio One had his own studio and all the rest had their own studio. But they didn't rent the studio. They only used it for their own purpose. So when my husband opened the doors to the public, it was a big thing for them. And it was $20 an hour. And there was Ninik passing through, but Peter Tosh passing through, everyone passing through. Because I think they felt comfortable too. You know, they could do what they want upstairs.
You spoke a little bit about the political situation in Jamaica back then in the 60s and 70s. When you and your husband decided to relocate to the United States in the mid to late 1970s, was that a difficult decision?
Yes. When my husband and myself decided to leave Jamaica, it was getting really bad. We were afraid of our life and we were afraid of the children coming from school on the bus. And when we decided, it was a decision. We didn't think. We just said, yes, we have to go, so we have to go. But I didn't realize when I came to America how different it was from leaving back home. You know, I came here, nobody knew about reggae music much. I had to be finding school for the kids. I have to be finding where to live. I have to be educating the people about reggae. It was very, very difficult. But one good thing about it is that I could talk to my husband left 3 years before we did. My husband came with Clive and my first son, Chris, and my two other kids stayed back 3 years before I came, so that our papers could be passed through. And we didn't even know where to live or where to set up shop. We thought about Florida. Not much Caribbean people lived there at that time. We talk about Brooklyn, where my brother-in-law, Victor, lived. We said it was too crowded. So we decided on Jamaica, Queens, because it reminded us of back home. Not much Caribbean people lived there 40 years ago. It was, the train was overhead and it was a big department store. But we just chose Jamaica, Queens because it had a name where we came from and we just felt comfortable. And my husband said, don't worry, in a few years you'll find a lot of Caribbean people moving here.
Are you still involved in the day-to-day business of VP Records? And do you still enjoy turning on people to new music?
I don't go to the store every day. I sort of left my kids to run it, Randy, Chris, Angela. And we have so much dedicated employees for many, many, many years. We're like a big family. But I never lost my friends that I started out with. They would call me every so often and we would chat about music. I try not to lose the connection that I have with the music. And when I traveled and I listened to my music playing, I went to Rotterdam and I was hearing some of my husband's music playing. And David Radigan was on the air at that time. I said, oh my God, these young kids, they were like 20, 15, and they're playing this music that my husband and myself was like, oh my God. My husband didn't come with me, but I was so amazed to know that music never dies. Because when you hear music for the first time, don't care how old it is, and you hear music for the first time, it gives you that same joy. And that's the power of music. I'm just how happy that I did music instead of working in a grocery store.